Hello, I am Rabbi Stacey Blank, the Director of Education and Leadership Development for the World Union for Progressive Judaism. This is our second presentation in the series about our values propositions. We met in May 2023 at the International Connections Conference in Jerusalem, and we participated over 200 people in 20 roundtables to discuss our core values. Today, I will be presenting the results of those discussions and our reformulated value of our second value proposition. Our second value is the World Union for Progressive Judaism advances the progressive/reform approach to Judaism. I'm going to use the words progressive and reform interchangeably because some of our communities call themselves reform communities, and some of our communities call themselves progressive communities. I know there are other terms that people use, liberal and others. So just know when I use progressive and reform, I mean the same thing to connect with how our communities identify across the world. So if we look at what values people connected with most, we look at the concept of a Judaism of critical thinking. And I think people were also seeking to help us to discern what is it that truly makes an approach to Judaism reform or progressive, what sets us apart and in a positive way in our self-identification. So first is a Judaism of critical thinking that thinks about different ways of looking at things and does not take tradition as something that we can't discuss and as something that we can't open up and re-examine. The second important value that people felt strongly about was diversity and pluralism and openness as central terms. And we're going to see this as a trend in all of our values. A central idea of being a world union is recognizing diversity and pluralism even within our own tent. Another very central value was keeping tradition and advancing innovation. That as Reform Progressive Jews, we are constantly balancing between tradition and innovation. A fourth point, that modernity is a blessing, but it is also a challenge, and we must face it with purpose. And finally, we want to strongly advance the idea that progressive Judaism is authentic Judaism, not just an alternative, not just easy Judaism. It is authentic, thoughtful, and you could say challenging Judaism. So here we have now our revised text based on the feedback that we received from all the reporting, the different roundtables. And I call this our Mishnah. The Mishnah was the first rabbinic text created or written down after the Torah, an attempt to write in simple language what it is that Jews do. So this is our simple text to explain what we as the World Union do. The WPJ operates according to the progressive/reform approach to Judaism, which aims to make Judaism accessible to all seekers and to support them in making informed choices on Jewish practice. We preserve enduring and meaningful traditions of the past, and as we experience the unfolding revelation of creation, we integrate the eternal values of Judaism with new ideas and practices, which imbue our lives with intention and purpose. We look with a loving, critical eye at both our beliefs and traditions, as well as the blessings and the challenges of modernity. While we endeavor to establish common global progressive principles, we recognize the diversity of our communities to promote Jewish pluralism. We act with a belief in the essential and transformative power of innovation and creativity. We believe that this approach is an authentic Jewish practice. In the words of the prophet, Chadesh Yameinu Kikedem, renew our days as of old. And in the spirit of the Talmudic sages who taught, I efshar lebeit midrash below chidush. There cannot be a Beit Midrash, a house of learning, without innovation. We seek to empower leaders who can serve as the spokespeople for the progressive reform approach and educate both within our communities and beyond. And now we'll move to what I call the Gemara. The Gemara is the Talmudic text that takes the Mishnah, the simple text of explaining what we are, what we do, and the Gemara is the commentary. It expands upon the text. It offers explanations. It gives us insight to discussions and also opens us up to new ideas. So here I want to explain how we came to make some of the revisions in our value proposition based on the feedback that was given in the roundtable discussions. And oftentimes the comments here reflect a number of people who put forth the same idea. So their point was felt strongly because we saw that there was agreement among a number of people on one point. So if we start at the beginning, the WPJ operates according to the progressive reform approach, which aims to make Judaism accessible to all seekers and to support them in making informed choices on Jewish practice. So this statement reflects our box in the bottom left-hand corner that people requested that we relate to how practice makes our traditions, not just learning, but also the doing. And that reform does have its own traditions. Also, the question was raised, who is part of the progressive definition? And our tent is big. We are here for all seekers, Jews who are part of our communities, Jews who are not a part of our communities, but may want to be or take an interest in our values, and that we have interfaith families in our communities, and we have relationships with non-Jews who are curious and want to know what our Judaism is, and we certainly welcome them to learn about our approach to Judaism. The next point that was raised, that intentionality informed choice needs to be explicit. And again, when we're talking about what does it mean to be a progressive Jew as opposed to a different kind, a different stream in Judaism, a very clear aspect of our Judaism is that we explicitly say that every person has the opportunity to learn and to make their own choices. The suggestion was made to call our Judaism accessible Judaism. We provide access to Judaism for all people. We attempt to speak in the language, a modern language. We are not attempt to be not an elitist Judaism, that we want to make Judaism accessible and understandable for all, especially for saying you have the option to choose and make your own decisions. Then we need to make our Judaism accessible, that you can understand what Judaism is to make your own decisions. And a general statement of wording that we should include wording about why we even want progressive Judaism. So we hope that this entire statement reflects that. Continuing on. We preserve enduring and meaningful traditions of the past, and as we experience the unfolding revelation of creation, we integrate the eternal values of Judaism with new ideas and practices, which imbue our lives with intention and purpose. So there was a suggestion to create the statement of purposeful and intentional Judaism. Again, I think reflecting that our Judaism is not a blind faith. It's not, and then we say that we want to encourage people not to say, oh, I do something because someone told me to do it, or because everybody's doing it. So certainly you can say that those are your traditions, but our Judaism is one that welcomes doing things because they mean something to us and make our lives and our Judaism more meaningful. We look with a loving, critical eye at both our beliefs and traditions as well as the blessings and the challenges of modernity. And here, as I mentioned earlier, then there was a request to recognize that modernity is not all flowers and beautiful and wonderful things. It presents with a lot of challenges. We take AI, we take all kinds of technology, that every technology has its blessings and its challenges, its dangers, you could even say. And we want to recognize that. While we endeavor to establish common global progressive principles, we recognize the diversity of our communities and promote Jewish pluralism. And here, as we mentioned earlier, we know that not all communities live in the same environment. Some have more openness, some have less openness, and some have certain cultural contexts that need to be taken into account. And there was a very interesting statement that I brought here. Wasn't sure that it fits into our overall statement, but I thought it was a very thoughtful statement as we think about our Judaism that we share here in the bottom right-hand corner. And the idea, also the question is our Judaism progressive or should it be pluralistic? The suggestion to change the P to pluralistic. Something very interesting to think about for all of us. And the idea that we should reflect an understanding of Judaism is not just a religion, but also a civilization. That's a little bit of a Reconstructionist idea, and the Reconstructionist movement is a part of our world family. Complex of cultures, ethical matrix, legal philosophy, shared history. Our Judaism is an expression of a questioning people and applies a commitment to take responsible action, promotes integration rather than assimilation, empowering Jews to engage in the world in an authentic way, promotes a diffused leadership of many levels. So I think there's a lot we could discuss just with this statement about what is our Judaism. There are ideas here that fit into our discussions on Tikkun Olam, for example, and also our discussions about what is our leadership, what kind of leadership do we need. So I'll leave it there. Continuing, we act through the belief in the essential and transformative power of innovation and creativity. We believe that this approach is an authentic Jewish practice. So that is a challenging idea that we are Judaism light, that innovation and creativity are authentic, as is reflected in the words of the prophet, Chadesh Yameinu Kakedem, renew our days of old. And the idea that we're putting here some quotes from our ancient sources to give us authenticity, to reflect the authenticity of our Judaism, that Judaism was always a practice, perhaps not always, but certainly the rabbinic practice, you could say. No, this is a quote from the Bible, that our Judaism always supported the ideas of renewing, of coming up with new ideas and integrating that with tradition. And we bring also, not only from the Bible, that tradition, but the Talmudic tradition, the rabbinic tradition, which says that there should always be innovation. And certainly we can discuss what is innovation, how much innovation, how quickly the innovation, but we should all agree that innovation is a part of Judaism and certainly is a part of our progressive Reform Judaism. And our final comment on this page, we seek to empower leaders who can serve as the spokespeople. There was a strong feeling that this happens, progressive Reform Judaism happens through leadership. And I brought a quote here of one of our comments, that we look up to our spiritual leaders to lead us in this direction, that the people we don't always learn on our own. We need help, we need motivation, we need knowledgeable people, we need scholars and intellectuals, and we'll address this also in our value when we talk about Jewish learning. So we starting a tradition in these presentations that to explore what our technology has to offer us, and we turn to ChatGPT And I asked them if I fed in the text of the value proposition and asked the AI to give me 3 different versions of this text in 15 words. So I'll just read the first set. 1, the WPJ promotes inclusive Judaism, blending tradition with modernity, embracing diversity, and encouraging innovation. 2, WPJ embodies a progressive reform Judaism that honors tradition, embraces change, and fosters inclusivity. 3, WPJ strives for accessible and diverse Judaism, blending timeless traditions with innovative practices for all seekers. So if that helps us also to understand what is the reform progressive approach to Judaism and to say it simply in sound bites, welcome to use these statements. Another wonderful outcome of our roundtable discussions was the generation and sharing of plethora of ideas. So we're going to start with our shared best practices in the area of advancing reform progressive Judaism. So we have here Shabbat Rocks, imagining a Kabbalat Shabbat or a Shabbat morning service that includes rock and roll, music, and this kind of event celebrates inclusivity and perhaps bringing in people who connect with rock and roll and saying you can also be a part of Judaism. Perhaps it's also multi-generational, something for all ages. Creating a new Siddur, which incorporates modern text. Certainly as we prayed at the Connections Conference with our new Reformed Siddur in Israel, we have a lot of Israeli poems and songs, which were written by non-reform, non-religious people, which speak to our values. LGBTQ plus programming, that is, if we talk about inclusive Judaism, we include all different communities, and providing classes in progressive prayer. When we teach about what makes our prayer or our Judaism progressive, we're helping to advance the progressive approach. For reform tourism, helping people to understand what is progressive Judaism by inviting them to our communities. It could be Jewish groups visiting in our communities, could be non-Jewish groups who are visiting. Global learning opportunities. We're all very connected over Zoom now. In Argentina and Sao Paulo, someone mentioned the communities are open to different types of families. It would be very interesting for us to learn about what kinds of programming they provide that demonstrate that openness. Process of inclusion of women, again, it would be interesting to hear what kinds of things our communities are doing concretely to advance this value. Introducing different pronouns in our communications, gender inclusivity. And in Russia, for example, and I'm sure in other communities it happens, Beit Midrash that embodies the critical approach to text study. When we teach, and we teach in the progressive way, perhaps we also want to be sharing and pointing out, we teach this way, and this is a progressive value. And providing basic information, including brochures about what is progressive Judaism and having them available in our communities. And we shared our challenges at the Connections Roundtables. As mentioned earlier, communities around the world live in different countries that have different kinds of laws. And sometimes we have to recognize that the laws of our countries prevent us from fulfilling and living all of our progressive reform values. And we have to deal with assimilation, that people are scattered in our communities. They're not seeking to affiliate. They don't really always understand what is Judaism, what is progressive Judaism. We have a small community. We live in an area perhaps there aren't a lot of Jews. and or we have competition with other groups like Chabad or Orthodox groups who try to denigrate our kind of Judaism, and which cause us to feel second-class citizen thinking, that if they say our Judaism isn't real, isn't authentic, then we might start to think that as well, or people who might connect with our kind of Judaism think that as well. Lack of money, finances, to have these programs and to put out these kind of materials. This requires resources. Shortage of rabbis or high quality teachers who can teach us and help us to verbalize and to verbalize what is our Judaism. And there are risks involved sometimes in our communities to stand up and say, I'm a progressive Reform Jew. And sometimes people say, well, it's not worth it for me to take that risk. And to be a progressive Reform Jew sometimes is a little harder than to be in other streams of Judaism. It is a challenge to say, okay, let's sit down and think about it. Let's take the time out of our busy lives to really learn these different aspects of Judaism and to make these informed decisions, as opposed to someone just telling me, this is what you have to do to be a Jew. Sometimes it's confusing to say I have so many choices and I have to decide. Resistance to change. When we talk about innovation, not everybody is seeking innovation. They come to a community, they like that community, they don't want it to change. They want to keep things the same. And that it also certainly involves capacity building. Certainly if we talk about change, that we have differences in our age groups, that a veteran member might be very comfortable with what we do, and teens and young adults are looking for something else. How do we sustain both of those at the same time in one community and with our limited resources? And finally, brainstorming. How to learn from one another and collaborate with our different, also within the diversity of our world family. We have liberal Judaism, Reform Judaism / progressive Judaism. We have Reconstructionist communities as part of our world community. How do we learn and work together? And also within our local communities, to seek out partners, whether it's through the schools, the youth movements, government organizations, other religious or non-Jewish organizations. Utilize your WPJ staff and leadership at your conferences and gatherings. The Zionist organizations, national institutions, expanding our leadership training. And that's certainly something we're working on here at the World Union to do here, and also to help local communities to do. To make sure that our prayer reflects inclusivity. And that's certainly a challenge for our leadership, our spiritual leadership, to work with our communities. And creating safe space with no judgment. If we are truly open to diversity and diversity of ideas, then we need to demonstrate that in our gatherings. Bringing in experts, and experts can certainly be within our community from without. Again, our global community, Zoom, certainly opens up new possibilities for that. International exchanges, there's nothing like face-to-face and coming and immersing ourselves in new communities. And we're certainly working on that with Netzer, with Tamar, with gatherings, and with Shlichut, bringing different leaders to different communities around the world, not just from Israel, out to the world. Creating better communication, and perhaps creating talking points that help rabbis and other leaders to teach, not have to reinvent the wheel on our own. Education in large letters. When we are educated, it creates self-confidence in who we are and helps us to grow, helps us to innovate, and imbue in us belief in ourselves. I think self-belief also means self-confidence. And certainly it always helps to get people together socially when we can create those connections, then we can move together forward ideologically. So when you have these conversations at home, we invite you to have an ideological discussion, take this text and continue to build on it. What is your home text? And continue the practical discussion. What can we learn? How we can overcome our challenges? And most importantly, what can we do together? And I welcome us all to join in the mission of helping to advance around the world and in our communities the progressive reform approach to Judaism. Thank you.